Good evening, welcome to our webinar, Living Wisely, Living Well. My name is Nayaswami Devarshi, and we have weekly readings from Swami Kriyanandaji's book, and we will begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswarji, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow at thy feet. Divine Mother, as your children, guide us and teach us how to live rightly with the food we eat, the company we keep, all that we do. May we use every moment to come closer to Thee. Om Shanti Shanti. This week's topic is right diet, and it's from a reading, November 9th, from Living Wisely, Living Well. Swami Kriyanandaji writes, one's taste in food can indicate and can also influence his state of consciousness. Eat only foods that are rich in life force and energy. Some foods are stale and virtually dead, lacking as they do all vitality. For human beings, fresh fruits and vegetables are the best. Don't eat foods that are either excessively stimulating or excessively bland. Foods convey distinct vibrations, which affect one's consciousness. It is therefore good to avoid eating meat, especially the meat of animals that are intelligent enough to know that they are being slaughtered and that therefore experience such violent emotions as fear and anger. Fish, fowl, or lamb are better for those who crave meat. In consuming the flesh of more highly evolved animals, however, such as pigs or cattle, one absorbs harmful emotions into oneself. So Swamiji touches on a lot of topics in a short reading relating to diet, consciousness, vibrations, not only of food, but in many different ways. I'm asking my phone to be turned off here. Sorry. Paramahansa Yoganandaji talked a lot about diet, yet he also said not to be fanatical. He taught that, as he put it, make God, not food, your religion. And he also paraphrased Jesus Christ, who said, what comes out of your mouth is more important than what goes into your mouth. In other words, what you say to others and your consciousness is more important than the food you eat. That said, as this reading here points out, food can have a very strong influence on our state of mind and our state of consciousness. We shouldn't be dependent on food for these things. Yoganandaji also advised against people who feel weak because they didn't have their vitamins or their avocado this morning and their spine is bent and they get tired, and it's all in the mind. So the mind has to be strong. That said, he did advise his disciples to eat properly. Swami Kriyanandaji did the same. Right diet is a touchy subject, because I think maybe with more than any other topic, we have a lot of likes and dislikes when it comes to food and what we eat, for many reasons. People have different taste buds, they were brought up with different taste sensations. People are acculturated to loving Indian food, American food, Italian food, because they've been brought up in it. Or maybe it's just their smaller family is used to a certain food. It's very helpful to look at one's own basic principles at times and just reinvestigate them. I first faced this with food growing up. My family ate a lot of meat growing up in America. I never liked meat. It always felt too heavy for me. I think I was a yogi many lifetimes. And while I was still living at home, I started becoming vegetarian. I started making healthy granola and cereals, because in those days, you could not find healthy food in America. It was just impossible. So I was fighting a very, very strong tide of energy, of my family, my culture, but I knew that the direction I was going in was right. And I have found over the years that when I eat healthier food that has more life force, that is organically grown, that is fresher, I feel better. It's just very, very natural that it happens. I had a very interesting experience just about 2.5 years ago. I have an identical twin brother, and one of the wonderful things with identical twins is that you get to compare notes about health and different things that you're going through, different karmas. And I was visiting my brother, and I noticed something really striking, which was that he was a lot more healthier than I am. He had more energy. We would go on long hikes for the 2 weeks that we were on vacation together, and he would just leave me way, way behind, even though I do like walking and get a lot of exercise. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what is the reason for this? We're genetically identical. He is much more healthier. So I started observing. And first thing I noticed, I weighed about maybe 7 or 8 kgs, about 18, 19 pounds more than him. The other thing I noticed finally, because I finally realized that it had to do with food and diet, because I was so much heavier. And I noticed that he ate a lot more vegetables. We went out to a restaurant and I had a big plate of rice with some curried vegetables, which I love, on top. And he looked at my plate and he said, "What are you doing?" And I looked at his, and it was a little bit of rice with a lot of vegetables. And I made one minor change in my diet at that point. I just started eating a lot less carbohydrates and a lot more vegetables and fruits. Over the course of a year, it took about a year, but it was very natural because I wasn't on a diet or anything. I just changed my diet. I lost about 20 pounds. I started feeling so much better, so much healthier. I've had more energy. I felt less heavy. And interestingly, soon after that, I was reading Yogananda's writings on diet. And I discovered that all I had been doing in that year of transition, I had been going in the direction of what Paramahansa Yogananda taught about right diet. Now, again, he talked about not getting fanatical about it, but experiment with your diet and just try making some changes and see what happens. Now, the first thing to focus on is the life force in food. This is why the yogis, why Yogananda Swamiji in this reading said to eat fresh, raw fruits and vegetables as much as you can. Again, this doesn't mean to become a raw fooder and that's all you eat, but you will find that the more you eat of those things, the better you feel because it has a life force and prana. I have been a gardener for many years. And in the last year before I moved to India, which I've been in India about 1.5 years now, as part of my diet change, I started growing a lot of my own vegetables for daily use. Every day I would go home at lunch and I would literally harvest my salad greens and put them on my plate, and they would be in my stomach within 15 minutes. And I could tell that they had a lot of prana and life force in them. You could taste it, you could see it, you could feel it. And so try to find fresher vegetables, fresher fruits. You'll find that you start to tune in to fruits and vegetables that have a lot of prana and life force. So that's one thing. Yogananda said, if the stimulation of life energy is responsible for man's well-being, why is food so important? And then he goes on to say, natural foods, like raw fruits, vegetables, and nuts, have a harmonious and strengthening effect on the mind and permit the life energy to flow unimpeded through the body. And then he goes on to talk about the opposite effect that meat has. And then again about fruits and vegetables. And this is very interesting what he says, take note. Eating freely of fruits and vegetables can help you develop magnetism. Fruits are even more magnetized than vegetables. They are filled with sunshine and vital energy. As a gardener, I've noticed this over the years. You're very aware that a fruit, in order to get ripe and have the best qualities and color, the plant needs to be in the sun, the full sun. It has the solar energy into it. A fruit tree or even a fruit like a tomato, which is botanically a fruit, if it's in the shade, it won't do very well. It won't have the same life force. So it's solar energy, essentially, that you're eating. They are filled with sunshine and vital energy. Overeating is bad. Fasting is very good, as it gives the stomach a rest. Your eyes and your whole body will be magnetized by the kind of food that you eat. And so he is saying, fasting, I don't want people to get fanatical about it. He recommended fasting 1 day a week on juice, or maybe just eating fruit. Experiment with this again and see how it suits you. He also talked about overeating a lot. He said overeating becomes a bad habit. He said don't be ruled by 3 meals a day. Eat when you're hungry and don't eat when you're not hungry. Just this is the natural condition of humans, probably developed over thousands and thousands of years. I think it's only in the last maybe 50, 100 years that people think they just absolutely have to have 3 meals a day. Experiment with this. And again, watch your own energy and just try it out and see. As Master says, and it's all in this book, what I'm reading, it's this book, How to Achieve Glowing Health and Vitality. Really, really excellent book with a lot of teachings on developing magnetism, energy in many different ways. He also talks a lot about exercise in here, which maybe I'll just touch on that, because Yogananda was a real pioneer in many ways, with diet especially, because many of these dietary teachings really were unknown when he was giving them in America in the 1920s, 1930s. He also counseled his disciple, Swami Kriyanandaji, to take a brisk, fast walk every day until you break a sweat. Again, aerobic exercise, long, long before experts were recommending the use of regular daily exercise. This is part of a whole well-rounded physical, mental, spiritual diet in a way. So he said, ignore the dinner bell if you're not hungry. Now, the subject of vegetarianism. Master was not fanatical about these things. The way he put it here, he says, to my first generation of students, I didn't say much about a vegetarian diet. This was in America, 1920s. It was too unusual. Diet was secondary in importance, anyways, to the teachings of yoga. For the next generation, I recommended that they eat less meat. Most of them, on an average, became healthier. For this third generation, this was by the 1950s that he was writing this, I've recommended a completely vegetarian diet and find that of the 3 groups, the present one is the most healthy. That said, he wrote, I don't care much, however, for that word, vegetarian. Too many people are fanatics on the subject. I've coined what I consider a better word, proper etarian. Now, this idea of vegetarianism, I suspect that not everyone listening to me is a vegetarian. And Yogananda at one point said that there have been many great saints and masters who ate meat. There have been many evil people who were vegetarian. So it's not a sign of holiness for those who are vegetarian and proud of it, or for those who eat meat and feel bad about it. That said, you will find that meat eating makes meditation difficult, especially animals that have been slaughtered in violent ways, as Master said, that it causes fear, and that fear puts out hormones and emotions that turn into the meat that one eats. This is one reason why nations that eat a lot of meat tend to be more aggressive, more warlike. If you are eating meat, work gradually, if you can, at reducing the amount of meat, but also the different types of meat. Fish is better than red meat, for example. But also you will find that if you practice meditation and Kriya Yoga, many of these things naturally fall away. I spoke with a Kriya Yogi here in India a few months ago. He was telling me that for many years he was trying to stop eating meat, yet he still had a really strong attraction to it. And he started practicing Kriya Yoga. He said within a year, the attraction to meat itself just fell away, and he stopped eating it, not because he was trying to stop, but because his own consciousness reached the point where he was no longer drawn to eating meat. So meditation over time can help with this. Let it be natural and gradual, and not forced if you still are attracted to eating meat. And again, balance it with more fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, Yogananda in his book, he asks a very challenging question. He says, are you ready to change your diet? And that's a very challenging question because I think most people are attached to their diets, the sweets that they have and the things that they've been brought up with. And here he recommends just a very general guidelines for diet, not a real specific one. And what he says is, for a person in good health, the day's diet should be divided into 60% fruits and vegetables, 20% protein, and 20% starches and sugars. I'm going to read that again because this is probably his most broad, but in some ways important right diet advice. For a person in good health, the day's diet should be divided into 60% fruits and vegetables, 20% protein, 20% starches and sugars. And this is what I was intrigued by when I started changing my diet a few years ago, is that I discovered I was going close to Yogananda's ratio here, of having fresh fruits and vegetables, more the majority of my diet, fewer starches, and the right balance of protein. Now, if you do make a change in diet, generally it's good to do it gradually, but consistently make these changes over a few weeks, over a few months. And also observe how you feel. Observe your energy level. Don't let the first experiences influence you too much, because sometimes when you go away from your normal diet, there's a sort of a reaction, almost like a withdrawal symptoms. Give it some time. But instead of just only eliminating certain foods, start adding certain foods that replace those. In other words, don't eat less. And this is what I discovered. I lost almost 20 pounds, not by eating less. I ate just as much as I always did. I just ate more fruits and vegetables. It was as simple as that. So I was never hungry or feeling like I was less full than before. Now, here he gives an example. Let us imagine that we have before us 2 plates. The large dinner plate, whose duty heretofore has been to be served chock full of concentrated, acid-forming, good, solid, nourishing foods. And he's talking about meat and potatoes and these things. And half the size of the large plate, the smaller one, holds a lonesome lettuce leaf and a slice of tomato, answering to the name of salad. I have experienced recently, we found a very good source of organic greens for salad. And I've just been having a gigantic salad every day for lunch with a little bit more, and I have just felt so much better because of it. So there really is something to Yoganandaji's advice, to the life force and the prana that there is in food that is fresh and alive. So he talks again about some other general principles. He gives some do's and some don'ts. He says use what he calls a mono diet occasionally to give the vital organs a much needed rest. Mono diet is just simply eating fruit for a day, or maybe just having fresh vegetables or salads for a whole day. And it does give the stomach a rest to not have the combination or the mixture of all these things. He also says combine proteins with fruits, vegetables, and fats rather than having the protein by themselves. And he says vegetables can be combined with any foods. Now the don'ts. The first don't is something that I think will push a lot of people's buttons. It doesn't matter what country it's in. It's really the same everywhere I've been. Italy, I've lived for a year. America, where I grew up. India, where I've been for a couple of years now. Master says, do not use more than 1 starch at a meal. Starch, that would be rice, noodles, potatoes. That would be starch, pasta. And you'll find that most cultures, they really enjoy their starches in a lot of them. He also says, do not use more than 1 protein at a meal. So protein is cheese, eggs, nuts. He also says that nuts is the best meat substitute. Now Yoganandaji was he was a pioneer. He came up with inventions that are used today. One of them that was used for many years in the automobile. He, in his time, started creating in his kitchen, just very creatively, meat substitutes that used ground up nuts, vegetable protein, and tasted and looked like turkey and other types of meat. And now that's very common in America. Again, he was a real pioneer, leading the way in many ways. But ground up nuts are a very good meat substitute if you're trying to withdraw from meat, because you do have to replace the protein that you're taking with meat, with something. And so ground up nuts are a very good one. Nuts can go in a salad, they can go in many things. Now, raw foods. This is what Yogananda says about raw foods. A common blunder of vegetarians is to eat an insufficient amount or to eat a dead meal of overcooked vegetables minus all the vitamins. Eating meat is not worse than eating only a boiled, disintegrated hash of vegetable corpses. You can see he had a sense of humor about this. By eating boiled vegetable dinners, vegetarians lose strength and inwardly want to go back to a meat diet. And I see this having grown up in America and being one of the first vegetarians that I ever knew. In fact, I was a vegetarian before I had ever even met another vegetarian. People think that vegetarians just eat bland, untasty, overcooked food, because that's what I think a lot of meat eaters are used to eating, is their vegetables are always these overcooked things. So all these things are just general guidelines to follow. Change your diet gradually, but be open to experimenting and not just taking what is put before you and not just taking what your culture or society puts before you. Again, in my youth, I was a rebel in many ways. And one of them was with diet. As I was pointing out, I became a vegetarian, and I was in a family not just of meat eaters, but my relatives, some of them raised cattle and gave us all kinds of the best, tastiest beef in the land. And so I was really running against the river, the flow of the river, by doing that. And so in order to do some of these things, you're probably going to have to push against some resistance from yourself, from your inclinations, but also from other people. And again, don't be fanatical about it, and don't be negative towards others and their eating habits. Just experiment with some of these things. Now, Yogananda, in the end, he says that there is so much more important than food. He says, remember, it is not only what goes into you, but what comes out of you that makes you what you are. Some people who eat meat may be holy and self-controlled. Some who eat only vegetables and fruits may be knaves and lead uncontrolled lives. Above all, eat rightly, think rightly, meditate, and live in divine joy night and day. And that's, again, he's talking about people who, just because they eat vegetables and are vegetarian, does not make them holy. I think I read somewhere that Adolf Hitler was a vegetarian. So don't get too proud if you're a vegetarian, thinking that that by itself will make you holy. Now, in the reading, Swamiji also talks about a lot about the vibration of foods. You'll find that the person who cooks food, it's very important that they have a high consciousness. Swamiji very often pointed out that the cook puts a lot of their own vibrations into the food that they cook. And this is why he would point out that a mother's cooking, the children always love the mother's cooking because it was done with love for them. This is why it's not so good sometimes to eat too much at restaurants, because you're taking the vibrations of whoever is back there cooking the food, and you never know who that is. So be aware that all food has vibrations. Also be aware, and this is a very unusual concept, but I've seen it to be true, that when you are eating food, you're in a receptive mode and you're taking in vibrations. In Catholic monasteries, they have a very interesting practice where while the monks are eating their food, they are in silence, and one of the monks is reading from the books of scripture or stories of the lives of saints. And you really do imbibe a lot when you're eating. This is why Yogananda said, don't eat too much at restaurants. He said, the vibrations all around you, because you're in that receptive eating mode. You're taking in the vibrations of everyone there, the noise, the music, all these things. In fact, he advised some of his disciples not to go into restaurants, just sit in the car if others are there and eat some fruits and nuts, which you have to have very understanding friends if you're going to do this. So everything around food has vibrations. The place that you eat, the way that you eat, if you rush your food, it's going to have this anxious, rushed energy behind it. And so be aware and be more conscious with food. There's a teacher at Ananda Village who comes through. She is the leading teacher for the top medical doctor in America, who wrote the book and started the whole concept of reversing heart disease. Until that time, most physicians thought that heart disease could not be reversed, that once the plaques started building up in the arteries and the heart started failing, all you could do was, at best, pause that process. And so she became one of his teachers because he started a lot of practices that started showing scientifically that you could reverse heart disease and the problems associated with it. And she would come to Ananda Village and teach a lot of different practices. One of them was yoga, of course. Hatha yoga was very helpful for this, especially for its stress-reducing benefits. Another one was meditation, which of course lowers blood pressure, lowers stress. The other one was diet. Diet was a very, very big one that this doctor still teaches to this day, which is vegetarian diet, less heavy on oils and starches and those things that add weight and cause buildup in the arteries. But an interesting one that she told me, which I listened to, and is not always widely practiced, but when you can, it's good advice to follow. She teaches in corporate America, and she found that one of the things that caused bad eating habits and stress while eating was what she called eating and meeting. And so she tried to discourage, even at Ananda Village, the practice of having meetings while you're shoveling food in your mouth and talking business. She taught, and I had an Ayurvedic doctor who I worked with. She also taught the same thing. When you eat, do it in an environment that is sattvic, do it in a way, in a place that you're not rushed, you're not anxious, and your mind is on something uplifting, whether it's music, in silence, or just somewhere in a quiet environment, when you can. We can't always do this, but as many of these things that we can do, we should be doing. Now, the other thing in this book that Yogananda talks about, he gives a list of very specific foods that have sattvic energy and consciousness to them, rajasic energy, and tamasic energy. And so also be aware that stimulating foods can create a restless rajasic energy, but in fact for some people, they need that stimulation. If you're feeling tired and run down, really spicy food can really stimulate you. Once in my very early days at Ananda Village, I always remember this, we had a picnic and somebody was cooking vegetarian burgers. And Swami Kriyanandaji was there at this picnic. It was just a small group of us. And the person who made the burgers, and again, they were made from nuts and grains, he said that there was Rajo burgers and Sattva burgers. You had your choice. And the Rajo burgers had onions in them. The Sattva burgers did not have onions. And he was having fun with it. And I watched Swamiji. I was wondering, okay, which burger is he going to eat? And I was struck by the fact that he ate the Rajo burger, because he wasn't trying to portray himself as some super sattvic yogi. And onions, and one time he said, some of these rajasic foods can help you in a very rajasic environment that we live in. Kind of gets you almost up to speed in a certain way. So again, don't be fanatical. Be balanced with these things. And it keeps coming back to everything has vibration in this world. The food we eat, the people we associate with, the places where we spend time, the things we read on the internet, the movies we watch, the music we listen to. And so try to pay attention to all of this. And again, it doesn't mean to be rigid and protective and just uptight about everything, but do pay attention. That the more things that you can do in your life, the more moments that are more uplifting to the consciousness, that it really helps you by the end of the day. You will find also that many of these things will help with your meditation practice. you'll find that if you're too restless to meditate, sometimes you can find a very mundane physical cause. For example, too much sugar, too much starch creates carbon in the blood. Carbon causes the lungs to breathe more, to get rid of the carbon dioxide, the heart beats more, and restlessness ensues as a result of that. Kriya Yoga has the opposite effect. It oxygenates the blood and the body so the breath slows down. And so the food we eat, the people we spend time with, the environments that we put ourselves into, all can affect our meditation practice negatively or positively. And again, finally, don't be fanatical about it, but try to think in this way, as I do. We need all the help that we can get to live a spiritual life and to be able to meditate well and deeply. So take advantage of as many of these things as you can, especially these practices taught by our gurus. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.